I had 2 or 3 introductory remarks, and one of them I've already made about encouraging to read the Bible through. That's always a major importance. It takes you at least 3, maybe 4 times before you, I hate to say it this way, even begin to understand the Bible. The only problem that I have with reading the Bible through is I sometimes get upset, and I hate to say it this way, but I get upset with God, because every time I read it through, I think he rewrote it a little bit. Because when I read it, I said, I know that wasn't in there the last time I read it. And then eventually you start putting pieces together. Well, I understand this now because I understand that back there a little bit better. But that's true of just about any book you read. You pick it up and you read it a year later. Another fellow that I like to read, he said that you read a book and you put it on your shelf and you go back and reread it, and you're determined that the person rewrote the book in the last year because you see so many different things. The other thing with prayer, I started a new book this year, and I've got many of them, of prayer requests for the year. And some of them major, like praying for the church and evangelism and outreach and Bible study on Wednesday and for the Lord's return. But there's also whatever you've got your financial goals, you've got your health goals, spiritual goals, and just whatever other kind of goals that you might have. Suppose you need to buy a new car this year, or a new washing machine, or a new something or another. You can write that down. Anything. It's not limited to major things. It's just whatever you got on there. And one of the things that I read this last year with reference to health, they said the number one, not the number one, but a major indication about how long you're going to live is your muscle mass. And so I started out down at the rehab, cardiac rehab. They gave me a 10-pound weight. And I said, well, this is not too much to this thing. And then I went to 15, and then I went to 20, and it took me several months to be able to do 10 20s, 10 times 20. And so then I said, well, I think I'm going to jump up to 25. And now I can only do 3 25s. So my goal is to be able to do 10 25s by Easter. And the other fellow that I spent a lot of time with talking to, he said, what are you trying to do, kill yourself? No. And so then if I do 25, my other goal is to go to 30 by Thanksgiving. And so that'll finish the year out just about. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to do that, but I've got it written down. So the thing about it is, this is how I write them out. There's a lot of ways to write them out, but you write them out on this side, and then I draw a line here, and then on this side I start writing down when that was accomplished. And that's a critical item, because Hudson Taylor, when a missionary applied to go with his organization, he would say, let me see your prayer book. And then some of them would say, what do you mean? He said, well, I want to see your prayer answer book, because I can't have somebody out here paying a salary as a missionary who hadn't had any prayers answered. You're not going to accomplish anything. If God's not answering your prayers, either you don't know how to pray or something's not right. So you've got to learn how to have prayers answered, and it's one of the most evangelistic methods that you can use. If somebody said, how do you know God's real? Well, take a look at this. See all these? This is year after year after year after year after year. And God's been answering these prayers. And so you use it not only for your own, and you know the old song, Count Your Many Blessings. It's really exciting to take a look over your old prayer books and see how God has answered so many prayers. And it's not the major ones, it's all of them. Be anxious for nothing, but with everything, with prayer, thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. So one of these days, somebody might come up and ask you to take a look at your prayer book, like me. Let's see what you're doing. Let's see what's going on. Just to have a prayer book. Now today, we're going to start, as we talked about it some time back, 52 important chapters of the Bible. We're going to go through. That means it's going to be rather quick. Today is going to be Genesis chapter 1. Now there's a massive amount in there. And the biggest problem that I've had in the last couple of weeks, really months, because I knew I was going to be doing this in November, is to be able to figure out in chapter 1 what to do. Because y'all have been in church for a long time. And you probably, my thinking, I may be wrong, you're probably not a stumbling block in Genesis chapter 1. It's probably not a stumbling block to you. You probably got it all figured out. Well, when I say all figured out, it's not bothering you. I'm not worried about Genesis 1. It doesn't give me a stumbling block. I take it for what it is, and I'm just not going to be too worried about it. But I've heard a lot of prayer requests in here about your children and grandchildren and your neighbors. I guarantee you, they've got problems with Genesis chapter 1. And the first fact of the matter, they've got problems with the first 11 chapters of Genesis. That's the most difficult section in the Bible with people who are non-Christians to figure it out. Now, what I'm going to do is, I don't know if you've ever heard of this fellow, Hugh Ross. I think we talked about Hugh Ross. Okay, well, this book is Navigating Genesis. Now, one of the things I'm going to do today is I listened to some of his podcasts, and I'm going to play 4 minutes of one of his podcasts just to give you a little understanding of him. He is a certified genius, probably on the verge of being a savant, because when he was growing up at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, he would read through, according to his testimony, 4 or 5 scientific books a week at 4 and 5 years old. In fact, the matter, his parents were so concerned about him that they said, why don't you read something else? But you know that sometimes a person like that is like a Rain Man. And he said it took him a long time to learn how to relate to people, because he said his mother would take him to a grocery store and he would say, Mama, look at that big fat lady over there. You know, he just couldn't.
What's that?
Asperger's.
Ray, is he the one we watched a video of maybe a year ago?
In here?
Or is that somebody else?
Ray
Must be somebody.
recommended it, because I started watching
Yeah, he
him
was
after
tall
Ray
and thin.
recommended it.
Okay. Yeah, was that do you remember the one I'm talking about?
I don't remember watching
Okay.
one in here.
I remember, but I don't remember
Yeah,
his name.
I've got one of his books, and I can't remember if it's the same person or a different person.
Anyway,
Sorry.
no, that's great. If you have anybody that has a problem with anything in the book of Genesis, from where the giants came from where Cain got his wife, from how many people were on the earth at that period of time, if you have any person that has any trouble with any of that, this is about the best you'll find. Now there's another book, and not a Christian, is a Jewish guy, his name just flat left me right now. He's got a book called Understanding Genesis, Intellectual Guide to Genesis, Jewish person. He's helped me out a lot. from a Jewish Hebrew point of view.
Is it Robert Alter?
No,
Okay, he's a Jewish scholar I really like that has a book on Genesis.
his name will come to me in a minute. But-
They use that book. I know who you're talking about. Hillsdale College offers a course an online course in Genesis, which is wonderful. But they use that book as a companion, so it's really good. What's that guy's name? Hugo Ross.
Yeah, Hugh Ross. So I want you to listen to just a little bit of them, because and I'll tell you another thing. This really bothered me when I listened to him, because he said things in this that were so obvious. It's so obvious that I said, how come I couldn't see that? Why didn't I see that? But maybe I don't have an IQ of 160. Or maybe I don't know how to read like he knows how to read. But it is so obvious that it's right there in front of your face. So I hope you can hear this. It's called Evidence for God. It's a brief introduction from this church.
You mentioned this last night, but
It's the pastor introducing
over
him.
and over again, because many in the church believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old. So you're busting out these numbers that are way bigger than that. So with the Genesis account of creation, can you again help us understand your view of how the earth is much older than just 6,000 years old?
Well, keep in mind I'm an astronomer, so those numbers are not considered to be very impressive at all. In fact, in the early part of the 20th century, there was a young universe, old universe debate. And it was generated by astronomers who said, Big Bang cosmology is only giving us billions of years. That's not enough time to sustain any kind of materialistic or Darwinian idea of the evolution of life. And so a group of astronomers were promoting the idea that the universe was over a quadrillion years old. But eventually the evidence became overwhelming. It's only billions of years old. So I actually call myself a young universe creationist. I only believe in billions, not quadrillions. But I get the point. Some people actually think these days in Genesis 1 are 6 consecutive 24-hour periods. Now, I wasn't raised in the church. I didn't really get to meet Christians to get to know them until I showed up at Caltech to do postdoctoral research. But I started reading the Bible seriously when I was 17. And I started on page 1. And immediately I recognized that this word day must have at least 3 distinct literal definitions, because 3 are used in the text. On creation day 1, the word day is used to contrast days and nights. That's the word day for the daylight hours. On creation day 4, it's contrasting seasons, days, and years. That's day as 24 hours. But Genesis 2:4 uses the word day to refer to the entirety of creation history. That's day as a long period of time. The other thing I notice is the first 6 days are bracketed by an evening and a morning, indicating that each of those first 6 days has a definite beginning point and a definite ending point. But I expected to see an evening and a morning for the 7th day. It's not there in the text. There is no evening and morning for day 7. As you read on in the Bible, you find 3 texts, Psalm 95, John 5, and Hebrews 4, that tell us we're still in God's 7th day. Now, and I appreciated that at age 17. For me, it was a huge lightning light bulb event for me. Because something that had plagued me since I was 10 and a half was the fossil record enigma. How we see all the speciation before human beings and virtually none afterwards. I asked all my scientist friends, could you please explain why? They didn't give me an answer. The first time I picked up the Bible, it said, this answers the fossil record enigma. For 6 days, God creates. That explains all the speciation events before humanity. On day 7, he stops creating. That explains why we don't see it in the human era. And so for 6 days God creates. On the 7th day, he stops creating. And a number of Bible scholars have also pointed out that Genesis 1 makes it clear that God creates both the human male and the human female on creation day 6. When you look at Genesis chapter 2, God creates Adam first, has him go through 3 careers before he creates Eve. And he's got to work the garden, he's got to engage all these animals, and give them appropriate names. And then the text says that God noticed that Adam was lonely, and it takes more than a few seconds to be lonely, at least for most men. And so finally God creates Eve, and what does the text say comes out of Adam's mouth? It's the Hebrew word Abraham. It's used 20 times in the Old Testament, almost always translated at long last. So many Bible scholars have pointed out day 6 likewise must be a long time period, and the grammatical structure would point out that all the days hence. So we're looking at 6 consecutive long periods of time, and hence there is no contradiction between the time scale of geophysics and astrophysics and the time scale of the Bible. It's one and the same. God reveals himself through 2 books. Article 2 of the Belgian Confession makes that clear. It's one of the fundamental doctrines of the Christian faith.
Wonderful, thank you.
That is the same guy.
I think so, yeah.
I think it was when Brother Ray, not Brother Ray, Brother Mike was here
Okay.
that he showed us that.
I thought Ray did, but I could be getting things confused. But
What was his name again?
I don't remember, but I do remember him.
Oh, this
I
man?
wasn't sure it was the-
yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
the one I'm thinking of.
This is Hugh, H-U-G-H,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Ross, R-O-S-S.
but I mean, the video, is it the same guy, right?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, that
I
was-
just want you to hear him,
Yeah.
how he's come on such a long way. If you could have heard him explaining what it was like to try to communicate as Asperger, it was very difficult and
I
painful.
think that's what you had us watch.
Wow.
Did I?
I think so.
Well, maybe I don't remember that. But at any rate,
I'll have to hunt it down, see if I can
Yeah.
find it.
any rate, evolution gave me a problem in school, in high school. And the thing that turned me away from evolution was this paper here, because I didn't have this paper, but I had this idea, knew about it. It's 7 fossil hoaxes, phonies, that was used to prove evolution. Maybe you have read some of these. They were all a hoax. And here's one, a picture, one time that they had of Darwin, along with several other people, looking over one of these fossils, and they said, yeah, this is proof of evolution. Would come to find out this was totally false. And so I began to wonder, how can I trust anything that has that many phonies in it, that are intentionally, that were so naive that they couldn't figure out what was right and what was wrong. So I rejected it. Now I'll come back to the 6-day part. I wanted to believe in the 6-day creation, 24 hours. But as things moved along, it got more and more difficult for me to go the 6 24-hour day. Fact of the matter, one of the guys down at rehab, when we were talking about the Bible and about creation, he point blank asked me, he said, do you believe in the young earth, or do you believe in a long earth? And I said, well, I believe that the earth is very long. I don't know, the scientists will say 12, 13 billion years old. He said, okay, I'll listen to you. But if I'd have told him that I believed that the earth was 6,000 years old, they'd have said, I can't go along with you. Now, what I did tell him, I said, I believe God could create the world in 6 minutes if he wanted to, or 6 seconds. Fact of the matter, we're not told a whole lot. It says, by faith we understand that the world was created by God by the word of God. He spoke it into existence out of nothing. And I said, I believe that. That's what I believe. That's the only thing we have of the Bible. And so I'm saying this partly because of how you're going to run into people that's going to confront you when you start talking about the Bible, because that's usually the first 11 chapters of the Bible is where they're going to hit you, attack you, somewhere, some shape or form. Now, it doesn't matter that you have a perfect answer for it. That's not the most important thing. What I learned from Nicky Gumbel, a fellow in England, he said, somebody asked him, what about the people who've never heard the gospel? What's going on with them? Well, he answered a question. It was a little on the superficial side, but he said, they're not interested that you have a perfect answer. They just want to know if you've ever thought about it. Or did somebody just tell you to believe that and you believed it? You never even thought about it. You believe what you believe because somebody told you to. Now that's what gives you more trouble. But if you were to say that you did think about it and you have studied it and you've come to this conclusion, I've had that happen to me several times when somebody asked me, what do I believe about speaking in tongues one time, or losing your salvation? And I told him what I believed about it. And he said, well, that's good. I thought you didn't believe it because you didn't want to. And I said, no, I want to believe everything the Bible has to say. And I believe everything the Bible has to say. So I don't believe what I believe what I do, and I don't believe what I don't. Not because I just don't want to believe something, because I've studied it, and and he said, well, that's good. Because like I said, I thought you just didn't want to believe it because you didn't want to, because your denomination told you not to believe it. And I said, no, that's not the reason. I believe it because I've studied it. Now, the next thing I have thought about going through today, I've always got a little bit more than I can handle in one day, but the arguments from Thomas Aquinas. Now, you don't really need to go through all these, because these were developed by three folks years and years ago. Aristotle, Plato, and Pythagoras. Now, these 3 or 5 arguments were codified or put together more by Thomas Aquinas, who lived several hundred years ago. Now, here they are. Now, you can, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, because if you want to know more about these, you can go to the internet, type in 5 Proofs for God by Thomas Aquinas, and you'll find more than you got time to read, probably. But it's very logical, and you've all thought about it. One is the argument from motion. Now remember, these are 2,300 years old. And so sometimes they come back and say that, well, there's no modern scientists that believe any of these things. Well, you got Faraday, you got Pascal, and you've got a lot of famous scientists that are, they believe in God. Now, they may be more deist, just believe in a creator. It's hard to find a reputable scientist today that is not a theist. Being by that, I mean, they believe in some creator, a designed creation. It just didn't happen by accident. And one of the other things that really turned me away from evolution was the fact of the eyeball. How can an eye evolve? You know, it just can't do it. And I like something that J. Vernon McGee said. He said there was over 40 or 50 different theories on creation, and they've been proved wrong. And he has a very colloquial way of talking. He said, I can tell you that nobody knows because nobody was there when it happened. You know, they don't know exactly how it happened. They weren't there. But the other thing that Ross said, the first thing you've got to do is understand the point of view of the reference. Because whether or not there's a light or not, how can there be day and night when the sun hadn't been created? He said, well, you haven't read the Bible yet. In Genesis, it says, darkness was upon the earth, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the earth, the waters. God wasn't way up yonder. He was down here on the waters looking around. So obviously it's not going to be any light. So it wasn't that there wasn't a light from the sun. It was the point of view of the writer. So the second one was the argument from motion. Change in motion suggests there must be a first mover. Now maybe you've heard that phrase before somewhere, a first mover. If something's going to be moving, it had to have a first mover. The second argument was causation, that it had to be caused. There was a cause for what we see here. It didn't random pop up. And the next one is contingency. Now, it took me a minute to figure this one out.
What was that?
Contingency, the argument from contingency. Notes that the things could not possibly exist by themselves without something causing it to happen. That what they're basically saying is that things go from bad to worse in one sense. In other words, if you have a sandwich or a piece of meat or a piece of food and you just leave it sit on the counter, what's going to happen to it in 3 or 4 days? You're not going to be able to eat it. Well, that is, somebody has to hold this thing together, or it would eventually fall apart. And the third argument is the degrees of perfection. Things continually getting better. The car you buy today, if you buy one today, is going to most likely be better than the one you bought 10 years ago. Now, who made it better? Well, the engineers that were working on it made it better. It just continually gets better. And the last argument that he came up with is design. There's a design for everything in the universe. And one of the things I was going to do, the reason I brought my hat, is Stonehenge. It was so cold we couldn't get close, and I didn't even want to get close to it. I was all right standing close as I was. But it's been for 3,000 years measuring the summer and winter solstice for 3,000 years. Now, how could the solar system just automatically tilt the earth just right and cause the stars to go around just right, that something could be accurate for 3,000, our 2,000 years, 3,000 years, 2,000 years from now, and 3,000 years then, 5,000 years? How could something be so accurate for 5,000 years if it wasn't planned out? And so you don't need a lot, what I'm trying to get at, you don't need a lot of arguments. You don't need to use a lot of big words even. All you've got to do is just mention that I have thought about this. And I have analyzed this a little bit. Now, I'm already out of time, but my major thing was the rest. Rest. That was the one thing that he said that really perked my attention up on rest. Now you remember in the Psalms, it says, they shall not enter my rest. And that's Psalm 95. And then you go to Hebrews chapter 4, which is a major study on rest. He said, they shall not enter my rest. Now, that is one very critical statement in the Bible that every Christian needs to know and understand. When they came up to Kadesh Barnea and they said those giants are too big in there, we're not going to be able to overcome them. And God said, you're not going to enter into my rest. I'm not going to let you in. Even though the works were finished from the foundation of the world. What is the rest of God? The rest, R-E-S-T, meaning that God has already finished and already given you everything you ever need. God can't all of a sudden create something that he hasn't already created. Because what he said is the work of creation was finished on the sixth day. God didn't create anything else after that. Now, what made that so important is that he said there were no fossil records after man was created. There's no fossil records. They were all before everything. So God stopped creating. Now, I hear a lot of people, I say a lot, to me there are a lot, 5 or 6, 7 people. They get up in years, the ones that have said this. They were both deacons. And they said, I hope I have done enough that when I get to heaven, when I die, God will let me into heaven. I hope I've done enough. And I've been in rooms where they said that, and other people in the room, so I tried to convince them that Jesus died for their sins, and you can't do enough. You're never going to do enough to earn your own salvation. That's just not going to happen. You never can do that. So if you're not satisfied with what God has done, finished, you're never going to get saved. You can't do it because you're never going to do enough. And so if you ever hear anybody say, well, I'm trying to go to heaven. I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to do as much as I can. That's not going to happen. Now, there's a verse, Jesus, you remember what Jesus said on the cross? He said, it is finished. Now that word finished means you can't do anything else. You can't do anything extra. It's all been done. So, right now, we are in the rest, R-E-S-T, of God. We're in his rest. And he wants us in that rest if we will believe that it's already done. It's already finished. That's what Abraham said in Romans 4. He said, if you work, you earn it. But if you by faith, you receive it by grace. And so you don't be entering in that rest. Now, this is what really got me. I do not understand why it took me so long, because I prayed about it, the rest. I never noticed that there was never an evening to the seventh day. I never noticed that before. And so I don't say I got angry with the Lord, but I said, Lord, don't you remember how many times I prayed trying to understand that? and how long it took me?
Just asking. Just asking.
It would have saved me a lot of misery. Because I was trying to understand something that was already understood.
Maybe that was the point.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the point. You're going to have to wait until one day you're going to figure this out.
Yeah. But it's sure been helpful to understand it before.
Well,
But
there's a
anyway,
lot of questions I got like that. But
No. you're right. But the rest of God, he said, and that in that Hebrew passage, chapter 4, he said, do not harden your hearts. For there is a place the seventh day. Now this is a funny phrase in verse 4. For he has spoken in a certain place of the seventh day. Now a lot of some sarcastic seminary professors said evidently the Holy Spirit forgot where he said it. But he said somewhere, he said in a certain place on the seventh day, and God rested from all his works on the seventh day. Now Jesus rested from all his works because the work of salvation was finished. That word finished in the original language means it's complete. There's nothing you can add to it. And so if you're going to try to make sure that you've added a little bit to it, make sure you've done a little bit of extra just to make sure it all is good, not only are you wasting your time because you can't do anything. Can somebody come up to Jesus and say, Jesus, you know, the way you created that, I think I could have done it better. Can't do that. Can't do that. Well, there was 2 or 3 more things I had on this, but if you wanna keep looking at this, you can type in Hugh Ross. He's got a lot of videos, hundreds of videos that you can listen to. And Dennis Prager was the Jewish guy I was trying to think of earlier. And he's got 2, Understanding Genesis and Understanding Exodus. Very, very good books. From a Hebrew point of view. Any questions?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what you said about Adam. You know, also, did he just get bored in a week and needed, to create Eve? Or did it take him 100,000 years just to think of all the animals' names before he ever even got lonely?
Yeah.
You know, so I think everybody truly believes when they first start studying Genesis that each day is a 24-hour day. It could be thousands of years for each day. We don't know.
I think that makes the most sense of anything I've heard.
I mean, what he said or what we're talking about?
Well, that summary that he just said there, that's of all the theories I've heard all my life, that's always made the most sense.
Well, that's the reason I wanted you to listen to him, because he can say it so much faster than me.
Well, I don't think anybody will ever be completely satisfied if you really get started on Genesis. You can make a career out of that. Be a Genesis professor and still not know everything. But I still, that explanation right there sticks in my head. Because the text of Genesis was spread out over a long period of time, written by a whole bunch of people. And we didn't talk about it much, but around the time it was written, or the beginning of it was before the invention of writing. Cuneiform didn't come along until a good bit after that. And the Semitic nations adapted it. That took a little while longer. And then they started writing this down. But that was all a good bit beyond the actual pinpoint date of the Garden of Eden. So they had to have input from a lot of different sources to put it together over a long period of time. And in that interpretation, as you mentioned there, they could mean 10,000 years and call it a day. Somebody did along the way, maybe it got inserted that way.
Well, anyway, if you run into anybody that needs help, his organization, Reasons to Believe, is very good.
You know, the other thing that's funny is he named all these animals. We're maybe talking a million different bugs, birds, insects, whatever. How would you remember 50 days later what a wildebeest and a duck-billed platypus was? I can't name 5 animals. Everybody can name 5, but if you didn't know their names and then somebody asked you 20 minutes later, what'd you call those? You'd have no idea.
If you didn't write it down.
Yeah, that's it.
Gotta draw a picture too.
All the scientific names for insects and stuff, I can't even pronounce them, so how are you gonna remember that stuff? You know?
Plants the same way.
Yeah.
I hadn't figured out yet why he made moles. There's moles, there's your tearing up my yard.
Yeah. Well, there's a poet, Ogden Nash, he wrote, I don't know why God created the fly. That's his point. You know, I thought that makes sense too.
Yeah, we do, you wonder why, I mean, what's the point, but there's gotta be a point, there's gotta be a reason why they're here.
Yeah.
They eat up the worms that are under the ground, that's what they do, but I don't know what the point of that is either. It's just crazy, but it's just amazing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, it's good to keep thinking about all of this stuff. Now, I don't know how long, and that doesn't really worry me too much one way or another, because what we have in the New Testament, by faith we understand that the world was created out of nothing by the word of God. And the most interesting thing that has happened in the last few hundred years, maybe 50 years, is most scientists now, astronomers, come to the conclusion that the Big Bang was true. That all of a sudden there was nothing, and now it is. And you may have read the story of when Einstein went to visit Hubble. And Einstein believed that the Milky Way was it. And he asked, Hubble asked him to take a look through this telescope. And he said, I'm wrong. There's a lot more out there. And it's moving. It's expanding. And so if it's expanding, then there has to be a beginning point. Because something can't get bigger if it wasn't small at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these kinds of things go on. And he points out here, Ross does, that in the Bible there is a verse that talks about the expanding universe. Now, some scientists will come along and say, well, you're reading back into it what we know today is truth. Because if you didn't know that was truth, you wouldn't be able to say that. And then you go to Job, when Job said, can you separate the belt of Orion? You've probably seen those 3 stars in that constellation. They can't be separated. Now, how come Job knew that? How many thousands of years ago Job wrote it? Or Isaiah said, God hung the world on nothing, when they believed that believed that the earth was on the back of a turtle. Well, we could go on here for a little bit longer,
Forever.
but I don't want to see people fall asleep.
This is what faculties do in universities. They sit around like this all the time and trade vast amounts of knowledge. Then eventually the rest of us will catch up, I guess.
Well, I don't know about vast amounts of knowledge coming from me, because I tell you where I get it from.
Word of God.
Yeah, well, let's pray. Father, thank you for the day. Thank you for our time together. And Lord, help us to understand more of your perfect world. But the most important takeaway today, I believe, is that it's finished. And our salvation is finished. And what we want to do and what I want to do is enter into your rest. Don't want to worry about anything, because you've already provided everything that we need, that I need, and you've already given it. And when Adam and Eve was created, they didn't lack anything. They had everything they needed, because you had completed everything they needed. So help us to walk in that total completion every day of our lives, that you've already given us everything. Like Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer, you don't need to keep on praying and over and over and over again, because I already know what you need before you ever ask. So we just have confidence that you already know what we need, and you've already got it provided. So we pray in Christ's name. Amen.